Yo, what's going on guys, Arekkz here and welcome back to another Division video. It is the weekend, which of course means it is time for another vendor reset video. Chance for me to tell you guys what is for sale this week and of those items, whether or not anything is worth purchasing. So if you guys do enjoy this, you do find it helpful, then a like is always super appreciated. And of course, if you have any questions, drop them down below. But kicking things off this week with the special equipment vendor. Usual kind of warning for the named weapons. Remember that in 1.6 they are turning into exotics, so if you want to get any of these in preparation, because some of these are going to get unique talents that are actually pretty decent, then you can of course buy them in preparation. Historian, as a warning, right now is broken, so I wouldn't worry about that. But some of these items you will still be able to buy regardless, so I just say if you've got enough Phoenix credits and say they're burning a hole in your pocket, then fair enough, grab some. Also remember that the Phoenix credit cap in 1.6 is raising to 5,000, so you'll be able to have a lot more kind of stuff stockpiled. But that's just something to consider. But turning our attention to the kind of regular weapons, M45A1, Expert and Brutal, Vector 45 ACP, Meticulous, Commanding and Skilled, a G36 Enhanced with Predatory, Brutal and Focused. This one, obviously the G36 is a very strong weapon, it's one of the best assault rifles for PvE. This is not the best set of talents. Brutal is nice. Focused, you tend to get limited use out of. It used to be great when I paired it with the Alpha Bridge and the old Caduceus back when it kind of refreshed your skill cooldowns almost instantly. But since then, you'll find that generally speaking, because you tend to use your skills all the time, you will very rarely get good use out of this talent. But that being said, you could roll up Predatory and have a sort of 2 out of 3 weapon. So if you're looking for a G36 and you perhaps haven't got one, then you could consider picking this up as an option. Just bear in mind, it's not a kind of must buy, it's definitely not a god roll, and it's definitely nowhere near perfect. There's also a tactical SAS G12K, Swift, Talented and Vicious. You then have a model M700 with Sustained, Talented and Elevated. Interesting sort of anecdote here, I was playing Last Stand yesterday, and for the first time ever, I actually saw someone getting really good use of the Elevated talent. A little bit annoying, to be honest, because it was basically someone on the enemy team spawn camping us, but they were standing on top of the car park, and they were, of course, considerably higher than everyone else, so they, of course, get the damage boost for being elevated, and they were pretty much two-shotting most people coming out of spawn, so really annoying tactic, but it was kind of fun to sort of see someone actually take advantage of this talent for once, so just something to kind of think about. Anyway, Military LH6 LSW, Determined, Deadly, and Unforgiving. As for your armor pieces, I'm just going to scroll through these very, very quickly, because, of course, if there are any pieces that you are looking maybe to complete your gear set, then do, of course, think about these. But for the most part, you guys know the deal by now. As for your mods, Prototype Electronics mod with Skill Haste on, don't forget that Skill Haste is going to become an important talent in 1.6 because some of the cooldowns have been extended, so they want people to basically go to Skill Haste as a sort of must-have to reduce skill cooldowns. So do think about potentially holding onto these depending on the build you want to go for. And then Prototype Performance mod, Turret Damage. Of course, don't forget that the turret has also received an ever so slight nerf in 1.6. They have reduced the range. The damage is still the same, but the range has changed slightly, so just something to think about if you guys are turret users. Moving on from there to the gear vendor in the kind of main hall of the base operations. Nothing else at the Darkstone vendor worth talking about, but there is a tactical pack here with Resourceful on. So again, if you guys run any sort of skill builds where you have, say, a shield or something like that, then remember that with this, all your healing is also applied to your skill objects. So with, say, the D3F and C set in mind, if you're running a ballistic shield, you can then effectively heal your own shield. So very useful if you do run one of those types of builds. It also has skill haste on it, and it also has ammo capacity, and it has a default stamina roll. So actually not too bad there. After that, moving over to the Dark Zone vendors, only thing worth talking about in DZO2 are the pair of Savage Gloves. They have a default firearms roll. They also have assault rifle damage, damage to elites, and pistol damage too. So if you guys are looking for Savage Gloves, then this is one place you can go. Then in your DZO3 vendor, you have a tactical M1911 with Expert and Responsive, a Navy MP5N with Skilled, Adept, and Vicious. This one isn't actually too bad, all things considered. Skilled is just a nice talent to have. Not necessarily something you have to have on an SMG, it's just like a nice talent in general. Adept, of course, is very nice for SMGs, and Vicious you can, of course, get value out of, but in truth, you could roll out either Vicious or Skilled in this situation, replace it for something like Deadly or Brutal, and you could have a pretty nice roll, because don't forget that the Navy MP5, or just the MP5 in general as an archetype, is one of the strongest damage SMGs for PvP, so if you want to kind of think ahead to Last Stand, it might be worth having an MP5 just in case. I appreciate right now SMGs are not exactly in the meta, assault rifles are typically king, but it's always worth thinking about changes, because I know they are still trying to sort of tweak things and whatnot. So the long and short of it is, if you have spare credits and you can just buy it and throw it in your stash for like a rainy day, it might not be too bad. You also have a SOCOM Scar L with Accurate, Predatory and Dominant, a Tactical Super 90 SBS with Self-Preserved, Competent and Determined, Paratrooper SVD with Commanding, Competent and Disciplined, and a Military M60E4 with Competent, Accurate and Deadly. And then jumping up to your vendor in DZO6, just to show you guys the gear here, of course, as mentioned before, I don't really know what gear sets you guys are running, so just for the purposes of showing you guys what is available, then this is what is in your DZ06 vendor. After that, jumping over to the safe houses, taking a stop at Autumn's Hope first. There is a Pro-Start Performance mod here with plus 5% First Aid Self-Heal. Now this is something to consider because in 1.6, healing from your skills is not quite as effective if you are not spec'd heavily into skill power. So if you are one of those players that typically used to run like a stamina firearms build with a little bit of skill power and then just kind of rely on like a relatively decent heal, it's going to be a lot harder to get use out of that in 1.6. So you're either going to need to change your build and spec a little bit more into skill power, or consider stacking these to at least bolster the heal that you do have. Then moving down to the 5th Avenue DZ checkpoint, there is actually an MP7 for sale. This has Determined, Destructive, and Skilled. Actually a pretty nice set of talents. MP7 is pretty decent. As mentioned, you're still typically going to lean more towards the MP5 and the PP19. PP19 for PvE, MP5 for PvP. But the MP7 is still pretty nice, so in this situation I would roll out Determined, and then you would have a pretty solid weapon. Then jumping up to West 42nd Street, there is a Military Scar H for sale. Again, as the usual kind of reminder, this is the strongest damage marksman rifle archetype for PvE. So Scar H, Police MK17, the SOCOM as well. But this one has Accurate, Disciplined, and Ferocious. So for PvE purposes, Ferocious is of course a nice talent. Although do bear in mind, if you're thinking about 1.6 going into Legendary mode, the enemies there are typically red bar. They behave like hunters, so they're difficult, but they're not always elite in name. So you might not get quite as much value out of this if you're using it, say, for Legendary. There are still some elites that show up later on, but regardless, something to consider. But you also have Disciplined and Accurate, so you could roll out one of those for a slightly more useful talent and have something that is pretty decent. So just as a reminder, this is a good marksman rifle archetype to go for. And then finally at West 46th Street, the last one I want to talk about today is the M700 Carbon. Spoke about this earlier, kind of giving you my anecdote for dying in Last Stand, but this one has Balanced, Destructive, and Elevated, so you could actually get something decent out of this. You could roll out Elevated, because while it does have value in certain situations, it is quite a kind of select talent, so you wouldn't necessarily get broad use out of it. So roll something in there, in the free slot, have something pretty decent. The M700 is a nice model, so it's something you can consider. But either way, that is on sale at this checkpoint vendor. And that's pretty much it. It was a bit of a kind of dire week, to be honest. There hasn't really been anything exceptionally stand out. There are a couple of items that you could consider. I would definitely recommend grabbing that MP5 if you get the chance, just to kind of put in your stash in the event that SMGs do make a comeback. But besides that, everything else is pretty kind of average. One thing to consider if you guys are looking for things to prepare for 1.6, if you go to your map and you look for the weekly assignments, then if you do both of your weekly assignments, they'll give you weekly assignment caches, and in 1.6 those ones will give you a guaranteed exotic. Basically on a weekly basis you can get 3 exotics from the legendary missions, and you can also get 2 weekly caches. So per character that is a total of 5 exotic caches. So if you do want to prepare for 1.6, you can save the weekly assignment caches because they will give you exotics come the 1.6 patch. So something to think about, but besides that, not really much else to do. So thanks for watching, take it easy, catch you next time, peace out.